In case you missed it, it's the top 5 sports talkers of the day. Now, it's time for Dan Barrero's Top 5 at 5. Brought to you by Gutter Helmet of Minnesota. Never clean your gutters again. Learn more at gutterhelmetmn.com.
Turns out Alec Lewis will be on at 5:30 tonight, not 4:30, not 5 o'clock, not 5:04. So we'll get to the top 5 at 5 and maybe some outstanding leftover texts and a couple of other things that might be stuck in my craw. Looks like your Minnesota Twins are getting the job done again, right? They did it on the road.
They are. Alec, by the way, just texted me and said, what do I have to look up about 1976 to prepare for my appearance? I said, nothing. No, don't worry about it.
Just be yourself.
Just be yourself.
That's okay.
Yep, that's what we're looking for. Yeah, just when everybody was writing them off again because they'd lost 4 in a row.
Yeah.
What do the Twins do? They have an offensive explosion last night, win 10-6 against Cleveland. And then today, they're down 1-0 until late in the ballgame. They get the tying run in the top of the 8th. They're down to their final 6 outs. They get it. They get 2 in the 12th and come away with a split of the Cleveland Guardians series. It was a 4-game series. The Guardians took the first 2. The Twins took the back half. Minnesota wins 3-1 today. Their record now 51-53. They pulled it within a game of Cleveland for second place in the AL Central and are 5 games back of Chicago still, but 2.5 games back for the final AL wildcard spot.
Here's what's fascinating about today's game.
Taj Bradley, a good outing today, by the way.
He did have a good outing today. So for the Guardians, it's Gavin Williams who starts the game, right? Gavin, let me give you his line.
Yeah.
In 7 innings, through 7 innings.
This is a good bit here.
2 hits, no runs, 11 strikeouts, and 0 bases on ball.
That's pretty good.
How many pitches?
97. Okay, I get it. That's supposedly, in this day and age, that's actually a lot. But they pull him. They have a really good bullpen, right? The next guy they put in, Gaddis, has been brilliant. What does he do? He walks the first hitter. I think it was Royce White. No, not Royce White. That'd be a hell of a story. Royce Lewis, I think.
What's more likely, Royce White draws a walk this season or wins the senatorial spot?
Draws a walk.
I think so.
That's more likely. So Gaddis walked. In fact, I think he walked 2 of the first 3. I think he had walk, strikeout, walk. And again, it's an easy second guess after the fact, but you go, you had a starter in there who had not walked. I mean, he pitched clean. The Twins hadn't gotten within a sniff of him. And again, because this is the way baseball's set up now, you're going to pull him. We'll never know how different it might have been. And for all we know, the 8th inning, he would have struggled. But from that point forward, there was nothing clean about what the Guardian pitchers were able to do. Gaddis, and then they even brought in their closer, Smith, and he gave up. First guy he faced got a base hit. Excuse me. And in fact, from that point forward, as you said, we kind of took care of business and dominated in, what'd you say, extra innings, correct?
Yes, it was 12. They had opportunities in the 11th, first and third with 2 outs, did not come away with anything there, but then got what they needed with Larnach singling and then Keishel singling to drive in consecutive runs, and that was the difference.
I think Roden got the hit that helped them tie it.
He did, scoring Lewis.
Exactly right. It's a different game. I saw some, I think this was another one of those anniversary things. It involved one of the great all-time National League pitchers named Juan Marichal. And I think his line in the game is he gave up like 5 runs and 12 hits, and he pitched a complete game. It's like a different world. Baseball, in terms of pitching, was a different world then. And I'm not saying this is better now or this is worse now necessarily, but I don't know. You have a pitcher who is dominating the game, and you see all hell break loose and it get turbulent and messy, almost circus-like the moment he leaves. It does still give me pause that in that sense, managers had a better idea of, we keep going with them. Let's see what we get. Well, let's see if we maybe be a quick inning. Maybe it'll be maybe it'll be like 6 pitches, and then we'll go from there. Who knows? We'll never know, but the Twins took full advantage of that change. When you don't have any walks, and the first guy up in the 8th coaxes one, at that point, the whole game changed.
Comes around to score and ties it up.
That's right.
Twins return home tomorrow night to face the Sacramento on their way to Las Vegas Athletics. And did you see the nugget about the A's?
No.
Today?
Did not.
Your guy, Mark Cuban, is now a minority owner for the soon-to-be Las Vegas Athletics.
What's that all about? What's that leading to? Do we know?
Well, he just says, we really like the management and ownership team.
Okay.
Oakland on their way to the Strip, and Cuban wants to be a part of it. So M. Cuban is a part of that ownership team. Let me pull up the leaderboard here. Ben Coles, 9 under par, shot a 62 today. He is in the clubhouse leader, first round of the 3M Open up in Blaine. Emiliano Grillo is 7 under par. Jackson Koivan is 7 under par. And then big ticket, the headliner, the man who had the biggest crowds that people have ever seen, followed at the TPC Twin Cities up in Blaine. Scotty Scheffler with a 65, 6 under par. He's tied with Lucas Glover, Michael Brennan, Kevin Roy, Gary Woodland, and others at 6. So a very productive first day for the world's #1 golfer.
Lumpy?
Well, it's lumpy.
It's been a long time since you've done that.
I know. I mean, if not now, when?
Well, that's why I know. It's a
local event.
It's really the only reason I brought it up.
Where's Lumpy?
Where is Lumpy? He's probably in a hospitality tent somewhere.
Think so?
Yeah, I do. The other last thing I wanted to get to before we give you the final keyword of the evening for the Grand in Your Hand Big Bucks National Contest. Did you see the clarification Johnny Athletic had to the Anthony Edwards LaMelo Ball trip to Paris?
Yes.
It's not just those two that are going. And Anthony, by the way, apparently is married now. He got married this offseason. That was a big Twitter investigation the last 24 hours. Somebody noticed he had a ring on his finger, and apparently he's married now. So congratulations to Ant. We're happy for you. It's not just Ant and LaMelo that are going over to Paris. Ant's trying to get the whole band over there. He's trying to get as many Timberwolves over to France to hang out with Rudy and work out as a team, which I think is an interesting advancement and development. We talked about it yesterday. You brought it up when you were sitting in Sauce's chair during the top 5 at 5 that Ant apparently is spearheading this thing with his new teammate to go over and hang with Rudy.
We don't know how many are actually going to go.
We don't, but it's, L. James could go. I
don't understand Johnny's protests on this because he's claiming that he got misinterpreted. And based on what I thought he'd said and read, I thought it was about, two main guys who both are backcourt players, both who might be capable of lobs, especially, of course, the new point guard, are going to go over there to try to do some bonding with him. But he's saying, well, no, the whole bit was they're going for sure, and they're working on getting other people to go too. I have mixed feelings about this. It never hurts. But I'm not going to turn this into the thing that changes everything either. I think we'll see. I mean, again, it's a long way from here to there. How many other players are going to commit to it? Is it going to be for 2 practices? I don't know. I mean, I think it could be helpful, especially if they're going to be there a while. And I just assumed it was going to be helpful if it was the big 2, the backcourt, the starting backcourt. But I also I'm a little wary of making it seem like, now we're breaking through in a way that we never have before. I don't know. I think we got to be careful. I'll have to see more evidence than that. It may be a nice start, but again, is this a photo op? Are they going to be there for 3 hours? Are they going to be there for 3 weeks? What's it going to be? How far are you going to be able to? And is the coach going, or is that illegal? I don't even know if
I don't think the coach can go.
Yeah.
Remember, the Wolves got in trouble for that.
Yeah, you're right.
They organized something. They did. Yeah, we got in trouble. This is the Seine River. This is our Pecos River. Can't we call it the Seine River? That's the big river in France, isn't it, Paris?
Seine.
Seine?
The Seine River, yeah.
See, there you go. Yeah. Seine River. That's why there's 2 of us. Yeah. Seine River. It's our Pecos.
I don't know how pretty it is, but it's certainly historic. There's no question about that.
Well, looking at the AI overview, it's one of the most iconic ways to experience Paris.
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
Offering stunning views of landmarks like the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, and the Louvre.
You can't, people say a gondola ride on the Seine is unbelievable. Don't text me. It's a joke. Just don't lose your mind. It's just playing around. But go ahead.
FanandBigDeck.com. I want to give you a shot to win bonus bucks. It is our national cash contest. Final keyword of the evening is check. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword check.
I promise Alec Lewis in about 15 minutes or so will kind of cover the waterfront, clear the deck, so to speak, on some stories and get caught up on some outstanding texts from 1976. I should clarify. They weren't texts written in 1976 because I don't think texts existed in 1976. They're texts now referring to individuals who are living and enjoying life in 1976.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
American pronunciation, sane. French pronunciation, sen. Is that what you said? Or you said something in between? Sane. Yeah, I don't...
Or sign?
You might have said sign,
I think
whatever.
I said sign.
So, yeah, the French, in their language, rhymes allegedly with when or zen, sen. More likely in the United States, sane.
Good enough.
1976, 50 years ago, we were having some fun starting that bit today. I'll look back on how things were different then, sometimes better, sometimes perhaps worse, in pretty much every area, sports, pop culture, politics, etc. I am looking at the 1976 Minnesota Vikings preseason results.
There's like 12 games, right?
Pretty close. First preseason game, Saturday, July 31st. Miami 16, Vikings 3. Next Saturday, August 7. We beat the Chiefs 13-10. Preseason game number 3. Destroyed by Cleveland, 31-7.
Thank you, everybody, for coming here.
Sunday, August 22. We beat Cincinnati, 23-17.
Purple pride, purple pride.
Saturday, August 28th, we beat the Eagles, 20-16. And Sunday, September 5th, we concluded our 6-game preseason schedule by getting destroyed by Denver, 30-17.
The stories a stadium could tell.
Those are the days. 6, count them. Preseason games.
Think about those fan lines.
Training camp went on for like 4 months.
It had to have.
I think it started like April 1st or something, or pretty close to it. It was crazy. A very, very different world.
Not going to lie, I still miss Mankato.
I do too, yeah. They definitely lost something with that. I mean, they're not the only team to do it that way, but there's always a charm to it when it's out of town. And even more so, I think, if it happens to be on a college campus. And it didn't even have to be a big college necessarily. Like I told you, I grew up, the Bears were training at Rensselaer College in Rensselaer, Indiana. Maybe they knew something then about moving to Hammond. Training camp in Rensselaer, I should say.
Is that close?
Yeah, it's about, from Gary, Rensselaer, I want to say, you could do the mileage on it. I want to say half hour from Gary, or would it be a little more than that? You can double check it. It's been a long time but we did make that trip, and it was obviously advantageous for us because it was in the state of Indiana. But I still think it was a little bit of a hike from to Rensselaer. But I think training camps, having training camps on campus, I think there is some charm to it, and there's some history.
The bikes
that goes to it. Yeah, the whole bit,
all of it.
It's a little bit different.
So you go straight south from Gary.
Yeah. Well, how many miles?
You go through Maryville. That's Greg Popovich, right?
Maryville's last place we lived.
Okay.
This was just south of Gary. Correct.
So it's about right now, which is rush hour.
Yeah.
It's about an hour. It's 50 miles.
Okay, 50 miles. Okay. All right, then a little bit more than I remembered. That's fair. In 1976, we could actually exit off the major highways. I will ask, I don't want to go too deep into construction stuff because we spent a lot of time on that earlier this summer, but for the city of Minnetonka, is it a law that at all times, every summer, every year, that parts of Minnetonka Boulevard are required to be under construction?
I think it must be.
Because, there's a few sections where it literally never ends there. Because you go, okay, it was a big project.
Yep.
Now they're closing it up and they're fine. And then they've reopened. There's another part of the project.
Yeah.
It's almost like is codicil the right word? I don't know. It's like it's embedded in law in Minnetonka.
So you're talking about like as you get deep into Minnetonka.
Yes.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I have not been on that road in like 4 summers.
Bizarre.
Because of that. Actually, that's not true. I will have to be on that road after the show tonight to go pick up my kids at a couple of things. Mm-hmm. And I had to do it last week for the first time in a really long time. And I was reminded that that particular stretch, yes, is always under construction. Always.
It's remarkable. That's what it is. Was 9 years old, living in the Chicago area. We used to play all day until the mosquito spray trucks chased us. That's a great callback. Are you familiar with what he's referring to?
No. I get the point, I think, of what it is. But
I remember this most vividly at my grandmother's place on my dad's side, where this was in Glen Park, which was a part of Gary. And it's true. You'd get to I don't know, it could be 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So it's still light in the summer, pretty close to it. And the mosquito truck would come by. And it was basically it turned the neighborhood for a while into this gross cloud of presumably mosquito repellent or stuff that's supposed to discourage or kill mosquitoes. I'm guessing probably pretty toxic looking back on it.
Not great, yeah.
But that's what it was. It was the mosquito truck. Now, I was a little younger than that. This would have been in the 60s for me rather than the 70s. But, yeah, my guess is we don't have mosquito trucks anymore. Right? I mean, we have agencies that will come to your place and do that for you. But it was literally a truck that would just go street by street and just this cloud of insect stuff would be expelled out its backside. That's what it was.
We'll see, helicopters every once in a while randomly flying around and spraying stuff into forest areas.
Yeah, right.
I wonder what those are. I wonder if that's the same concept. They're obviously spraying for something.
They must be.
I don't know if it's mosquitoes or otherwise. But every once in a while, we'll see something like that.
I don't know if it's other stuff. That'd be a little scary, wouldn't it? But who knows? How would we say? I heard that LeBron has some upcoming travel plans to Europe. Possibly. I don't know. Is that true?
Maybe he wants to go back to Paris.
Didn't we make the same fuss when Kat took the team down to the Dominican Republic or somewhere? I don't remember that. Did Kat invite a bunch of players?
Sounds right. Yeah, it sounds right.
I'm not ever saying that you have to apologize for it or it's bad. I especially was attracted to it because it's the two guards with the big man.
And the big man that's not always the most popular among his teammates.
And also a guy that you have to figure out where's the best place.
Yes.
Given his limitations with his hands, you have the best chance to make a play. So I will endorse it. I just don't think it means we're set. I don't think it ever necessarily means that. But you can argue better doing something like this than doing nothing at all.
Agree.
I should have known this was coming. Dan, your comments on the Cleveland pitcher reminds me of the Rocco stunt a few years ago when he pulled Joe Ryan, who was working a no-hitter after the 7th. The Twins had 6-0 at the time. Ridiculous. Is that true? I don't remember. I'm sure we would have talked about it. Did he pull Joe from a no-hitter?
He may have. I don't remember either.
Now, I'm sure I ripped that, but I also thought that some of the ripping on Rocco regarding pulling pitchers too soon was a little unfair to Rocco because generally they weren't very good pitchers. Now, Joe Ryan is a different issue. And I thought we saw that when he had better pitchers, Rocco did give them more rope. Now, on the other hand, that's allegedly part of the reason Sonny Gray wanted to leave, right? Is he did not feel that philosophically he was in touch with the Twins' philosophy when it comes to letting starting pitchers go, as we say in the business, the extra mile. Couple more texts here, too. No, I won't Google that. Somebody says there's certain things we shouldn't Google on the basis of what we talked about today. 76, I was a sophomore at the University of Minnesota, living in the lamentable Frontier Hall. Why was Frontier Hall lamentable, I wonder? For some reason, each of us young male residents got a very small bicentennial bean pot donated by who knows what alum or company. I remain confused to this very day as to what I was supposed to do with a small bicentennial bean pot. Love the show. That's from St. Paul guy. Huh. Interesting. Is Frontier Hall Does it still exist?
It does, yeah. I don't think I've ever been there.
I wonder why he calls it lamentable. Was it like old and
probably
decrepit back then?
It's just probably a college dorm. They used to be that way, and that's how it was.
That's very possible.
Nobody cared.
Dan, I was 5 years old in 76. I lived in Cologne, Minnesota on Main Street. Remember vividly the parade that went through, fire department and the like. I also remember somebody across the street from the second floor dumped a bucket on somebody, obviously, who they knew below. So I had to follow up by doing the same thing with a glass of water, and then I hid. I also remember, these are the kinds of hijinks you could do back in the day, and they'd be innocent.
You could. Simpler times.
Not so much anymore. Let's come back, and I promise you this time, it's going to be Alec Lewis on the other side of a break.
I'll put him on the screen.
We're going to quiz him on a number of big events that took place in 1976 just to get him going, and we might talk some Minnesota Vikings as well. Stay tuned.
Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barrero on The Fan.
A lot of apps like to say they're free until they ask.
Alec Lewis covers the National Football League and the Vikings for The Athletic. He joins us now, about an hour after I suggested he was going to be on via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Alec Lewis, do you know what the Minnesota Vikings were doing 50 years ago in 1976?
I probably should know, and the fact that I don't scares me a little bit because of what that could do for my credibility. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine they were doing much in July of 76.
No, they were playing their first of 6 preseason games in July, because back then that's how many they played. They finished that season, 76, with a record of 11-2-1. And, of course, in the postseason, they knocked off the Washington then Redskins in a divisional playoff game. Then in the NFC Championship game, they toyed with the Rams 24-13. And then in the Super Bowl, they were edged by the Oakland Raiders 32-14. One, of course, 4 Super Bowl losses for the Vikings. And as we've discovered on this show, this is a little nugget for you that you may or may not be aware of. In 4 Super Bowls, the Vikings have yet to score in the first half. They are scoreless through 4 Super Bowls. So if indeed we get to the big game this year, the number one goal I would say is let's try to at least get 3 points in the first half and get on the board somewhere. Exactly right.
You know, it's so interesting. Like 3 years ago, I was back home in Alabama. I want to do this story on Fran Tarkenton, mostly because my dad grew up like a huge fan. He loved him, and it was kind of like a way for me to be able to, I don't know, make my dad happy maybe for the business that I decided ultimately to go into. And so I remember I went to Atlanta, drove to Atlanta, and met with Fran in his office for like 3 hours. And I still have the tape, so I probably should not paraphrase it. But I remember we were talking about some of the Super Bowls, and he was going rambling on all these different subjects. And he's probably said this publicly, and it's probably very widely known. But I remember him saying something to the effect of, like, they didn't practice the week before the Super Bowl games. And I don't know, again, I don't know if that's been said. I don't know if that's, like, legitimate. I never fact-checked it, nor did I write it because I was afraid to, you know, be very wrong on something, but it did make me think, like, there's probably like an unwritten history of just the arc of these games that obviously have helped create the vibe around these towns that has existed for too long.
Well, to your point, that subject came up just within the last 6 months. We talked about it. He brought it up on another interview recently. And that was, again, his contention was the off week, we didn't practice.
Bud didn't want to.
Bud allegedly did not want to. And he claimed that he claimed that he was always a big part of the game plan, which I always thought was a little unfair to Jerry Burns, but that he wasn't here to give any input because the players, they weren't even around necessarily. Some of them might have been. And again, it sounds a little bit like an excuse for, poor performance. And I don't know that anybody's ever been able to confirm independently the truth of it. It might be true. I don't know. It's hard to believe, but I guess it's possible.
It was so like it definitely. I mean, before I went and sat with them, like I read a bunch of books. I think I went back and read a book that he co-wrote kind of with Jim Klobuchar. So I came in prepared, or I felt like I was prepared. And then he was talking through this preparation for the Super Bowl and them not, and it seemed like there was like contention. And I do remember sitting there and my mind was spinning because he was for one second he's talking about his investment in Apple, and another second we're talking about his, upbringing in Georgia, and then we're talking about preparation for the Super Bowl. I'm like, it's not something I've revisited, but you referencing this
it did
does make my brain go a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind some independent corroboration one way or another. And I guess the other question is, do we know necessarily that other teams back then practiced too? Maybe the Raiders didn't either. There's a lot of things that went into some fairly dysfunctional Super Bowl performances, including the fact that they played, in some cases, probably better teams, even though that was not understood because we were the big bad NFL and the AFL was still, relatively speaking, kind of establishing its credibility.
Chuck Foreman's going to have to be the one to tell us about that.
Yeah, you know what? Have we ever asked Chuck about that?
No, but that 1976, that's got to be the game where, against the Rams, that he talked about a lot, the hot toddy game.
Yes, that's
where
true.
they walked out and saw how cold LA was, and they're like, these guys are cooked. Like, we're going to beat these guys. And
I think the story was right. We come in for halftime, and on this card table, there's this weird, mysterious libation.
It's like a hot chocolate.
That to this day, he said he didn't know what was in it, but they felt like there might have been some suspicious stuff in it that helped warm them up. He did talk about that, but I don't know if we ever asked him about the practicing question.
We'll have to do it.
We definitely need to do that for the record. That's for sure.
It's pretty crazy. And I guess in some ways, the history, though, 1976, in my knowledge, really failed there. Like I've got a story tomorrow on Dennis Ryan, who was the equipment manager for like 47 years that I've wanted to do for a long time, and it was fun to do it. But it is, when you have conversations with some of these guys, it does. I am like envious of that time, and I also think like probably should hear some of these stories more and pay attention to them because they probably have relevance.
Yeah, they might. There's no question about that. Maybe that's something we will look into as well. Let me start with something we discussed on yesterday's program, and it may relate to one aspect of Kyler Murray's career that you've already vetted or that you've already spent some time on. And it was a series of quotes from the former wide receiver Steve Smith. And it was one of 5 million podcasts that are out there. And in this one, Smith basically, he was attempting to analyze the Kyler Murray passing style, what he does well, what he does not do particularly well. And his compliment was, on shorter passes, he's very accurate and he's very good. But on the other hand, his other point was, but there's a lot of check down Charlie to him in that it seems to eliminate the middle of the field to a great extent. Now, I think that part of it we've talked about before. But on the basis of the research you've done, is it fair? Is that a fair representation? You know, check down Charlie is a fairly pejorative term in pro football. It's not a term where you go, oh, that's a guy you can win with. It's a feeling of he's going to take the path of least resistance. He's going to go to the check down sometimes too soon, etc. In the research you've done to this point, kind of laying out what Kyler's strengths and weaknesses were in Arizona, is the check down Charlie nickname, is that fair to him?
Yeah, this is a great conversation. I've done a lot of work on it, and so it's good. It should be good to talk through. I think the pejorative nature of calling Kyler a check down Charlie, misses, I would say, the nuance and the context of really the different parts of Kyler Murray's career. And so if you go back, let's just say to 2019, his rookie season, or you go to 2021, his third season with Cliff Kingsbury at the helm, with DeAndre Hopkins close to in his prime, with AJ Green, with a ton of options. and a more capable offensive line, Kyler did throw the football down the field a ton, and he threw the football down the field with great effectiveness, especially early in his career. Now, if you just kind of take a look at the numbers of more recent years, you're going to see much less percentage of attempts deep down the field, and you're also going to see much less effectiveness. And so in talking to people who have spent time really close to him in Arizona, both probably stages of his career, I would say the nuance that is important to talk about with the last few years is the receiving core. I mean, you just think about his receiving core last year specifically. It was Marvin Harrison Jr., who had a very up and down season, Michael Wilson, Xavier Weaver, and Zay Jones, guys whose names probably most listen to the show aren't that familiar with. And then their offensive line was pretty freaking poor. And so it's my understanding that Arizona's staff, by design, knowing what they had, was less comfortable placing Kyler, who has had durability situations, in positions to where he was dropping back deep behind a porous offensive line without a ton of deep weapons. So I think that layer of context is important to at least consider within a conversation that I do think has relevance to the offense that we're going to see this fall.
I've discussed this with Seifert and a number of other people. The assumption I believe most of you jackals, media jackals, have, and I say that, of course, with the greatest of respect, is that this is if there is a competition at all, if that's real, it is between, you could argue, the incumbent, J.J. McCarthy, or at least the guy who was to start at the end of the season, and the new guy, Kyler. And that Wentz is back because of his experience, because we want the deepest quarterback room ever, if there are injuries, etc., but that he in no way, shape, or form has a real shot at being in this competition to be the starting quarterback at the start of the season. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it would have to go overwhelmingly and surprisingly poor for Kyler Murray, first and foremost, right. But then also J.J. McCarthy. And you could go down the road of, who knows what injuries surface and the timing of those and how that would affect things. But no, I'm viewing this as very much a high probability that Kyler Murray is the starter week one against the Green Bay Packers. And if in the event he struggles mightily throughout training camp and J.J. McCarthy shows an impressive amount of improvement and consistency, then perhaps that changes. That's how I'm looking at it.
Fair enough. I got into the subject a couple times this week, too, about Caleb Banks. Everybody kind of knows the story, knows he's viewed as a can't-miss talent if he can stop breaking bones in his feet, right? That's the issue, and that's a massive if, given he's a massive man. Based on what you know now, do we think he will hit training camp as a full participant, or is he still in a mode here where it's going to be very, very hit and miss in terms of how quickly one could hope that he could be a significant part of whatever this team's defense is going to be in 2026?
Yeah, I would clarify this by I haven't asked anyone directly about Caleb Banks and his availability in probably since probably OTA. So it's a question that I haven't directly asked. But from my understanding at that time, and I don't believe it's changed from anything that's floated across my phone, I would say, or conversations, was that he would be good to go beginning in training camp. Now, I expect, or beginning when training camp starts next week, and we'll be out there for the first available practice Wednesday. The way that this Vikings medical staff, and you guys know this, tends to operate is they are pretty, they take it slow. They're very conservative, I think, in terms of having guys work back. And so if it's, he's not participating in every first team rep with the defensive line, I don't think that's going to be much of a surprise to me. But I will say this, if we go out there next Wednesday and Caleb Banks is not present or he is off to the side, I do think it's going to dictate questions from us Jackals, why that is and what that then looks like.
You laid out via The Athletic a column in which I think he said, the quote was 45 thoughts on 45 offensive players. I'm not asking for all 45 thoughts because we don't have that much time, but I am asking for you to pick 2 or 3 of your thoughts that you think might be surprising, intriguing a little bit to the average Vikings rube that's paying attention.
Yeah, my mind goes to the offensive line, and first and foremost, Brian O'Neill, who is entering the final year of his contract. Brian has been a staple on the offensive line. Kevin O'Connell has praised him at every turn, both for what he's done on the field and as a leader within the locker room. And so beyond the quarterback competition, beyond Caleb Banks' health, one of the first questions that I will have walking out there is, has a deal been consummated with Brian O'Neill? If not, is he practicing fully? Is he holding in? Will there be, soreness related to whatever, it sounds like when we go out there? I think that's really where I start. And then my mind just floats to the rest of the offensive line. It might be boring and it might not be the sexiest topic for radio, but regardless of who's playing quarterback, I think it's very worth it to have a conversation about this unit in a season with a new offensive line coach, in a season coming off the ups and downs of what it was for Christian Darrisaw in 2025, in a season where it looks like the starter at center is going to be Blake Brandel, who hasn't played the position a ton in his life. And so I just think that group, I've said this, but last year there were 17 combinations of Vikings offensive lines that played at least 10 snaps. That was an astronomical number, second in the NFL behind the Los Angeles Chargers. I think chiseling that number down to at least 10 would be productive, but the performance of that group, as much as anything to me, needs to be talked about, analyzed, and internally for the Vikings prioritized for them to accomplish what I know they want to accomplish in 2026.
I couldn't agree with you more. It may seem boring, although in this town I don't even know that it is, because I think there's such trauma when things have not gone particularly well. And I want to take the Brandel example, or that position, as an example of what concerns me a little bit, because my inclination, what I think I remember coming out of last season, and even in the offseason, when it almost seemed as if, well, the projection is they're gonna try to, make Blake be the guy in that position, was you can't be serious necessarily about going into a season and project him as a center who's going to hold up and be really, really good. And then we get further and further from then, and it's almost like people forget those concerns, and then you start thinking, they like him internally. They really think even without that much experience at the position, he can ease into it. And I'm left wondering whether the initial, I think, inclination then, which was, that's a danger signal, man. That's a danger zone. You're asking for a lot. That you're asking for a pretty significant leap. So let's drill down on that one. Is it a pretty big gamble to try to convince yourself as an organization that we're fine with Blake Brandel as our starting center?
I do think, this kind of reverts back to the Kyler over the middle conversation.
Yes.
Because I've talked to, and the people I've talked to from Arizona, one of the things that's come up more than I expected, and it's been, I think, educational for me, has been people have talked about protection for Kyler and how, that protection on the edges for him might not even be as important as interior protection because of his feel and ability to kind of make things happen. And he has kind of a sense in the pocket of, okay, guys floating around the edge, whereas pushback on the interior with him specifically can affect his eyes, and that ultimately can sometimes affect his ability over the middle. So some have posed to me, as long as the interior, the protection in the interior is good for Kyler, he'll look pretty, really solid in that offense. And so the relation and having Blake Brandel as a guy that they've been convicted in for a long time, I think is, I don't know if you call it a bet, I don't know if you call it a risk, but it does feel like a potential conversation at some point in the season. I know this. Like, they definitely eyed centers earlier in the draft. There was probably a point in the middle rounds, I'd say, where I expected them to pull the trigger on one of them. That didn't happen. And that, to me, speaks to a level of conviction, at least for now, in what Blake Brandel can do with everyday reps at that spot. And we will all find out together whether that trust, faith, and belief is misguided or not.
Last question regarding training camp and even some players and some circumstance. We've obviously spent a lot of time this offseason dealing with the quarterback position. That's inevitable. It's going to be it'll be front and center once training camp opens. So it's
maybe forever.
Maybe forever. You're right. And the age-old question is, when you're trying to report on it fairly, and you could say, comprehensively, how do you go about the business of not overreacting to any single practice or any single game? Or do you say it's at least at the start so wide open, or at least that's what they've told us it is, that my job is to chronicle and comment on or offer up analysis on pretty much every single play, because that's how this whole thing is set up?
It's such a good question, and it's the inside baseball of it that, I had Kevin Seifert on my podcast this morning, and we talked through this a little bit, even on the podcast, because obviously I respect the heck out of the job he's done for such a long time. But I think it's a combination of, yes, you in my role and you guys' role, anybody who's around this, like, it is our responsibility to be as comprehensive with what we see as possible. But I also think there is a realistic level or layer to it where, like, I don't get to the practice tape afterwards. So let's say in the event next week, Kyler Murray doesn't throw the football, he scrambles around and makes a great play. Like, I won't have the recall unless I see it in real time, or the ability to review, did he misread?
Yeah, good point.
And those are the things that Kevin O'Connell and this Vikings offensive staff will care about most. I think the other complexity with it, and we've talked about this before, and we will talk about it, I'm sure, over the next few weeks, is Brian Flores is trying to prepare his defense the best way possible. And as he's proven in recent years with the defenses they've had, that often does not involve taking it very easy or calling what's expected to be called, or allowing the quarterbacks to thrive. And so that dynamic included just adds further, I would say, it just adds more to sift through. And I think it's just at a time like this, and always, it's when you cover a team in the role that I have, you try to be as fair, objective, and straightforward as possible. And I don't ever think I've been perfect. I don't think I will be perfect, but I will be mindful of it every day. And I think that's the place that you got to start.
I'll leave you with this. We started this conversation talking about the fun we're having with looking back 50 years ago, especially this summer, but not exclusively, the entire year. Whether the subject is Minnesota sports or pop culture or the state fair or whatever. I got this text from an individual who was listening to our discussion about the Vikings' last Super Bowl, which was technically the next January, right? But off of this particular season, the 1976 season. Here's what he writes. My mom only made fondue on special occasions. For the Vikings' last Super Bowl, she went all out and served the cheese, chocolate, and the very rare beef fondue. Everyone was drunk and angry by halftime, and my mom never served fondue again ever since that day in 1900, technically of 77, but after the 76 season.
The stories a stadium could tell.
I didn't know fondue. I thought that was more of like the 1990s hit, and people were trying to get creative with food. I didn't know fondue had that longevity.
Has a rich history.
Very rich history. Who knew? Who could say? Are you in training camp shape? Are you in training camp shape? I asked Seifert the same question. Do you have a regimen that you follow in the weeks before training camp to make sure you are in training camp shape?
Gaardsy knows this. We talk about it frequently, which is both good and bad. But I really have been trying. I mean, I've hit this point in my life where I'm eating the same stuff that I've always eaten, but it's not, the pounds are starting to stack on. So I'm really doing. I really have been pushing my body to the limit to be prepared for being out there. But I haven't secured a bucket hat like Seifert, but that may be the next step. Kind of phase of this.
Yeah, you might have to. I was about to say, welcome to reality. Yeah, the older you get, suddenly it's like, well, I'm not eating any more than I did, but man, oh man, it seems to stay with me more. Yeah, well, get ready for it. There's more of that coming.
It's not getting better, buddy. No. I hate to tell you. It's not going to get better.
That's 100% true.
I'll do my best.
Thanks for the time as always, and we'll see you at training camp. Thanks, Alec.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Appreciate
Talk
you.
soon. Looking forward to it.
Sounds good. Alec Lewis from The Athletic via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Top of the hour pause here. I got a couple of A-section items to at least explore briefly, and we'll continue with an outstanding array of texts that have come in today on a number of very controversial subjects, 64686. And we will, for those who weren't a part of the program early, perhaps revisit where we began this particular program, a piece of writing that once again confirms the sad reality that the WNBA does not really know what exactly it wants to be. Sometimes not as evidenced just by what players do and commissioners do, but what people who occasionally cover the league write about. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK-GARY Traffic Center.
The program with a fairly detailed rant regarding a column written by a USA Today columnist who should have known better, but then again, I'm not particularly surprised that she found a way to go down the road she did, attempting to link individuals, she pointed out, white individuals, who seemed to be quick to try to protect a white player, Caitlin Clark. And she actually, and you can look it up. I'm not going to give you all the quotes on it because I don't think it's really worth repeating to that degree. But she used the Emmett Till analogy as being worthy. The murder of Emmett Till as a logical comparison point to white women being weaponized, threats, I should say, to white women being weaponized against African Americans. I'm not making it up. It's not satirical. It would be funny if it were, maybe, if that was its intent, but it wasn't. She meant it seriously. It's a grotesque attempt to make whatever point she thought she was trying to make in very sensitive fashion. But somebody asked earlier, where are the editors? How did it get past the editors? And it raises an interesting question because as somebody used to write a column, I think you want your independence. You want the best editors I ever worked for defended the right of their columnists to write what they wanted to write. That independence, vital. If you don't have that, then you really don't have much. In other words, the best columnist would say, I disagree with everything you wrote in that column, but it's your column. And I'll stand by you because that's what I think is the journalistic thing to do, to foster that independence, that you don't have to check certain boxes to please me. So that side of me would say, well, if you're an editor, do you get involved because of that question of independence, even if you don't like what you necessarily see or don't agree with the sentiment? Now, I tend to think if I was her editor, Nancy Armour's editor, I would have, in this case, probably said at the least, we need to talk about this a little bit.
Are we sure about this?
I mean, do you understand the implications of what you're saying? And she would probably say, I'm insulted that you asked the question. But I think you're at the very least, your obligation as an editor is to have that conversation. And I did have that with editors a few times. Ultimately, they let me write what I wanted to write, but at the very least, I think in this case, there needed to be a conversation. And for all we know, there was. We don't know. We don't know what the history of it was there. But because you can't write a column by committee. In other words, you can't have a situation where, okay, well, this is a sensitive subject. Maybe we should run it by 3 or 4 people to see how they react to it. And I would always say, I'm not comfortable doing that because, again, this isn't a committee vote. My name's going on it, so I have to be the one that's comfortable with it. And the problem with the committee approach is what? You might just be at the mercy of the wrong people being on the committee, where, well, if we had one more person, they would actually think, okay, I kind of see what he's going here. I would say fine. That's where you can't, you do that to a columnist, you kind of take his head and his heart or her heart away from them, so to speak. But I have no idea if there were any of those conversations. In the end, editors have a right, I guess you could, in situations where they think there's a taste question or an accuracy question, that they have a right to say, we're pulling this. Columns have been pulled. It has happened from time to time. What the history of this here, in this case, was, I don't have any idea. And as I mentioned, part of what has disturbed me about this episode, the last 24 hours, is it's the classic playing it both ways. She's under heavy heat, so she decides to clarify in her mind, and she thinks she's let herself taken some of the pressure off by suggesting she made a quote-unquote inartful comparison with the murder of Emmett Till. I would say it's a flat-out false comparison and a dangerous comparison. She's one of those writers who likes to talk in terms of things being dangerous. Caitlin Clark or people who are trying to defend her, they're creating a dangerous environment. I would say if you want to go down the D word, I would say that analogy that she's using in of itself is dangerous, not to mention disrespectful of one of the worst moments in American history, the Emmett Till lynching story. And in the alleged mea culpa, she can't resist it. There's a history in this country of perceived threats to white women being weaponized against African Americans and the danger that poses to black players in the league. Players have been abused online, have been reported receiving death threats. That has to be taken more seriously. I don't know that anybody, she's not going out any kind of a limb there. I've not heard anybody who has attempted to downplay any of those threats or to say that they should be fully investigated and vetted. Many of them are just people talking, as sick as that is, but that's part of the reality. But if they're more than that, they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But to pretend that Caitlin Clark now is responsible because she flops too much and because there's a debate within the basketball community, not just the WA community, but the basketball community about whether she's protected too much or not enough. And that all this might lead, these words, these are loaded terms, weaponized. She's talking about crimes that were committed. It's on a completely different level. But in her world, it's much easier to oversimplify. And so, again, to go back to the whole editor thing, at the very least, I'd hope to think that there was conversation about Emmett Till. There's a million ways to say what you're trying to say. And I'll defend your right to say it, even if I don't agree with what you're conveniently leaving out from the Caitlin Clark side. But my God. One of the most offensive and worst murders in the history of this country, because of what it symbolized about the state at the time of race relations, to bring that forward 75, 80, whatever number of years later, as if one thing has really anything to do with the other on the basis of some verbal threats. Come on, man. But that's sort of where we are. And as you asked me, I think it will be a topic All-Star Weekend. And sadly, I think, again, it's odd what happens is that Caitlin Clark goes from being the victim to the person who's apparently responsible for everything. It's her responsibility that you have lunatics on social media anonymously doing what lunatics do on social media, and it's directly connected to how she complains about officiating. So rather than any discussion about what led to that last suspension, ends up almost as if it's kind of, Caitlin kind of brings all this on herself. It's laughable. And until somebody in leadership position has the guts, the courage to call it out and to say, what are we doing? What are we doing? I don't think it's likely, quite frankly, to change. Do you? I just, no. That's what's sad about it. The league, in so many ways, not just because of her, from a talent standpoint, but definitely mainly because of her, whether people want to accept it or not, from the standpoint of the level of interest being through the roof, is in a better place than it's ever should be, in a better place than it's ever been. And yet, frankly, it's not, because it cannot get out of its own way. Continuing these internal debates. And I'll say again, there's no place for racist taunts, threats, whatever. None. But if you leave out the rest of the story about the series of conditions that have been laid out on this show and elsewhere that Clark has had to deal with from the moment she got into this league, you're being disingenuous, and you are not facing the truth. That's a part of the story that you can't conveniently leave out, unless you're really not interested in getting to the bottom of the story or confronting everybody that needs to be confronted in this particular case. We'll come back, wrap up the program, and let you know what we have coming up on a busy show tomorrow. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
From the 1-800-ASK
Show Wrap.
Waconia Walt, I believe our news organization should bring and tell everyone what the reporters have learned, minimizing opinion, minimizing bias. Part of our problems are that our news organizations give opinion pieces catering to a bias, trying to disguise them as unbiased news. Since it's clearly an opinion piece, can we make an art an artful comparison of the Caitlin Clark story, the Minnesota political fraud stories. The people who could have called out fraud were the editors. I'm not sure I understand the analogy from Waconio Walt. Maybe text me tomorrow and we'll flesh that out. This is clearly a column piece. This is not supposed to be a news piece, but I'm not sure I quite get the people who could have called out fraud were the editors. I don't understand where he's going with that, but I'll read it overnight and have a little better view. I want to thank Alec Lewis, who joined us early today. Dr. Dan's Inbox, good contributions as always today. Tomorrow is the Friday Football Beast edition of the show. Michael Hurley is going to join us tomorrow to talk what appears to be U.S. being on the brink of intensifying the war with Iran in a big and significant way. There's a lot to get to regarding that story, and he is scheduled to join us tomorrow. In addition, maybe Ben Gessling's return. And we're assuming Lavelle's return. That's usually the case, too.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see where else it might go. A lot of good text today about our new concentration, new discussion that we hope to kind of carry through the rest of the summer about 50 years ago.